Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Erwin Chan. I am an instructor in the philosophy department at UBC. Welcome to this workshop where we're going to discuss what group exams are, why we should use group exams, and we will also talk about how to start designing questions that are particularly suitable in a group exam setting. And also, if we have enough time, we will also discuss some questions, some objections against group exams that deal with fairness. So I'm not going to use any slides in this workshop. What I'm going to do instead is to use a collaborative document. And this collaborative document is also something probably that you have never seen before. I try to avoid any Google service and product. And this is RiserPad, which is, although the server is not in Canada, it is an open source document, and therefore it is more privacy conscious, and therefore I prefer that to Google Docs. So you'll be able to see at this point just 1-2 sections, but over time, as we proceed, I will put more information there. So what I am going to do is to do a share screen with you. And I will give a sort of 10 minutes introduction with some brief notes on that document. And then mostly afterwards, after the introduction, mostly the documents will be for our discussion purposes. So let me do share screen. So what exactly are group exams? So a very good way to understand what group exams are is to compare them with a traditional exam. In a traditional exam, thanks for posting that link there again, Elisa. So in a traditional exam, students just go to the exam room, do the exam individually, and then when they're done, they are done. They can leave. That's it. A group exam is different. A group exam is an exam where students will first of all do the exam individually on their own, just like in the traditional exam. But when they're done, they're not done. They will either redo part of the exam or the whole thing, but this time in groups where discussion, where talking is allowed, if not encouraged. And usually the way it works is that each group will have one answer sheet. So what it means is that, say you put 5 or 4 people together and then they discuss, they need to agree on their answers and then write them down on that piece of paper, on that answer sheet. Usually the individual section and the group section, they have different weight. So, and usually the individual section counts for more. So one way I usually do it is 85%, so the individual section counts for 85% of that exam grade, and the group stage counts for 15%. And also for various reasons, the group stage will count only if the student performs better at that stage. So for instance, if they got a B at that individual stage, but for whatever reason in the group stage, they got a C instead, then that group stage would as if it never existed. So that student will get a B on their exam. So that's quite a setup there. And then you may wonder, why is it that we want to use group exams to begin with? Now, one important reason why we want to use group exam is exactly that group exams help students improve. Now, if you think about what I just told you about group exams, what group exams are, you will notice that it is a very good way for them to try again and do better. In particular, they can do it not on their own, but with other people, so that they can discuss and figure out the right answers and then also toss out the wrong answer. So studies after studies show that group exams can improve students' performance. Some studies also show that group exams can improve student learning. The reason is that if you put a few students together to talk about some questions, which they have worked on already, then they can figure out the right answers and also figure out what answers are wrong together. That means they can immediately learn from their mistakes, knowing what they know and knowing what they don't know, and for things that they don't know, hopefully they will be able to figure out and correct their mistakes and make improvements. And hence group exams can improve student learning. There are also studies showing that group exams can help improve motivation and also help students, encourage students to prepare more for their exam because of the expectation that there is this group exam stage thing in the exam. And relatedly, because students know that they have an opportunity to improve their answers and improve their grades, they are also less anxious when they're preparing for the exam and also during the exam, compared with when they are expecting only an individual traditional exam. So it sounds to me that, I don't know if you agree, I hope you agree, it sounds to me that group exams sounds good, and it is definitely something that we should try to use and just help our students in many different ways. So if you are on board, if you are interested in trying to design, trying to use group exams in your courses, then let's talk about this together. So I teach philosophy. Usually for many of the group exams that I have used, it was for a critical thinking exam. But I have also used group exams in other courses, more traditional philosophy courses, so introduction to moral philosophy, business ethics, so on and so forth. So in general, from my experience and also from things that I have read about group exams, it is better to use questions in a group exam, to use questions that require limited writing. So the reason is fairly obvious. If you put a group of people together, group writing is usually a bit more difficult to manage, for them to manage. So it is better if the questions do not require them to do a lot of writing, which means that they can focus on figuring out the answers, agreeing on an answer, and then write things down for, I don't know, a minute, 3 minutes, done, next question. That will be the best, easiest kind of answer questions to manage, for them to manage in a group exam. And we should also try to use questions that can encourage exchange of ideas, in the sense that these are questions where they will have things to discuss. So not just the answer, but figuring out the mechanism behind how to find out the answer. So multiple choice questions are usually very useful in a group exam setting, but I've also used things like argument analysis, in the sense that they will have an argument, but then they will need to analyze it in terms of figuring out what the conclusion is, what the premises are, what exactly is the argument saying. So these things require some exchange of ideas that they need to discuss together to figure out what's going on and agree on an answer. So multiple choice questions, argument analysis questions, application questions where they will need to use a theory to analyze, to apply to a case, by using that theory to analyze, if not to evaluate that case, which is what I said, which is the fourth example argument, evaluation. So looking at an argument, saying something about whether they think it is a good argument or a bad argument. So this is my experience. I teach philosophy, but I think that in many disciplines, they have similar questions which are very suitable for group exams. So say in economics, they have a lot of, and also some applied mathematics, as from my understanding, there are a lot of application questions where they have to apply a theory to analyze a case or to different cases. Also, I'm not an economist, not a mathematician, but this is what my impression of the disciplines are. Argument analysis, maybe not in other disciplines, may not be argument analysis, but analyzing other things. And then whenever there is an analysis, there is a lot of room for discussion. So I think that group exams are useful not just in philosophy, but also in many other disciplines. And in fact, I heard that there are a lot of natural sciences departments in UBC where group exams have been used for quite a while and with quite some success. And I have come across some papers published by people who are teaching there. So my understanding is that group exams will also be very useful in many science disciplines. And so at this point, what I would like you to do is to get together to discuss a few things. So what I want you to think about at this point is to design 2 questions that you think will be suitable for some course that you're teaching. So 2 questions, they can be very specific. You can spell out all the details of that question, or you can simply specify the kinds of questions that you would use in a group exam for a course that you're teaching. So design 2 questions. You can be specific, you can be general. And also please briefly mention the course that you're teaching. Okay. And then I would like you to share your questions with your partner. So we're going to pair up and then exchange your ideas, just like in a group exam. So see what ideas you have come up, and then see if you have any comments on your partner's designed questions. You don't need to write them down. You could if you would like to, but what I would like you to do ultimately, in terms of the collaborative documents that we're using, is if you have any questions or comments, please post them there in a document. And we will have about 5 minutes time to wrap up this discussion. Any questions about this discussion, this exercise, or more generally, any questions about what I said earlier about group exams? If not, then let's move on. Hang on, sorry. Yes, that's right. I was just going to explain. So yes, let's move on. So I think that Elisa, if you would be able to start the breakup session would be good. So we can do 10 minutes, 2 people in a group. So 5 minutes for your own question designing process, and then 5 minutes for discussion. But of course, If you're ready, if your pair is ready, you can start your discussion earlier. Good. So I've got a question in the document. It says, does the group discussion usually take place on the same day as the individual attempt? Yes, at least that's how I have been doing it, and a lot of people have been doing that. So the way I do it, the way I have been doing it, is that students won't even leave the exam room. They will stay there, finish the individual section, and then it's over. And then I collect all the exam papers, and then we start moving on to the group section. Now, however, I know that there are some other instructors who did it in many different ways. And one way to do that is that the groups section will take place later, but still on the same day from what I have read so far. So there are different ways to do that, but I think that probably from a management organizational perspective, doing the group part immediately after the individual section will be a lot easier, particularly if you're using if the exam is the official formal UBC final exam, because they will give you 2 hours, 3 hours, and that's it. It will be much more difficult for you to ask, can I have a different time slot for exam part 2? I suppose I've never tried that. I suppose it can be done, but that will require more management organizational work. How much time, another question, how much time do you allow for individual versus group stage? The way I usually do it is 1 hour each. So because it requires students to redo the exam, so this exam should be at least how do you put it, half as long as a normal exam would be. So instead of having a 2 hour exam, you should have a 1 hour, if not shorter, exam. So then the individual section will last 1 hour, the group section will last another hour. I will add, if not longer, the group section, if not longer, because if they need to discuss, usually it will take them more time to do so. And they will also need to discuss and then write down the answer. But if what you're dealing with is a midterm test, then things will be different. But still, these general principles, we should still keep these general principles in mind. More questions coming up. Are students graded on their amount of participation in the group discussion? Or is it solely based on their second attempt at the exam in a group setting? Different people do it in different ways. My thought is that, all things considered, the best way to do that is not to assess their contribution, but just give the whole group a grade, 1 grade for all group members. And in fact, this is one of the things that we are going to discuss in the next discussion question, because this deals with free writing. Yeah, we will discuss that further. Although I'm looking at time, we have maybe only 10 minutes left for the discussion. But these questions are good. And let me look at the 4th question there. Do you grade the group decision-making process showing the work? No, I don't. I have never thought about that, never heard of that either. Group decision process. So I suppose that means this has something to do with how they work together and work out their answers. No, I don't. And I don't know how this can be done. Yeah, I don't really know how this can be done, because you can look at the draft, but if we ask them to write, if we let them know that we are going to, their grade will be passed partly based on their draft, then they may be very conscious about making sure that their draft is legible and also not just legible, but also people can understand what the ideas are. But then, yeah, I don't know. I need to think more about that. Yeah, but normally I don't. And I think that from my understanding, most people don't do that either. Most people who practice group exams don't do that. My thought is that if it is a course, so if it is something that is very important, like as if it was, for instance, is part of the course learning objectives, then perhaps it's something that you should definitely consider. By that, I mean, if the course emphasizes group work, how to negotiate, how to come to consensus with other people, then that is something that you should definitely consider. But for the courses that I'm teaching, it's not a course learning objective, and so I don't do that. Okay, shall we move on to the next discussion question? So let's see, how many people do we have? 14, 12, that's actually 11. Okay, that should work. So I have just posted the 3 discussion questions for discussion part 2. So what I would like you to do is, there are 3 questions in total. Each group will be responsible for 1. Okay, and you will be assigned with one of the 3 questions. And in each question, there is a fairness objection against group exams. So it describes a problem that appears to be, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, appears to be a fairness issue that people may think that this makes group exams unfair. Okay, and so what I would like you to do is look at the problem described in the question, and first think about whether you think that this problem will exist at all in group exams, and if it does, whether you think that it constitutes unfairness. Okay, question 1. So all these things are in the document, so you can refer to that if you don't fully understand, can't really follow what I'm saying here. I'm just sort of generally describing what we're going to do. And if you think that it is indeed a unfairness problem that is present in group exams, suggest some ways to minimize this unfairness problem. Okay, that's it. And then so discuss that in your group, and then afterwards we will do some sort of a gallery walks where you will go to the group below you, and the last group will go to the first group. Does that make sense? All the questions are in the document, so you'll be able to see them. Okay, I figured that we didn't really have time to do the gallery walk, but that's okay. We can slightly change the format and simply now at this point have an open room discussion. So if you have any thoughts or any ideas which you discuss in your small group that you would like to discuss with us further in this big group, please raise your hand. Raise your hand. Just tell us anytime. In particular, I heard that there were 2 groups which seem to be very interested in the topic of introversion versus extroversion. So we can talk about that too, if you would like to. Any thoughts from your small group discussion that you would like to share with us? Please.
Yeah, I was from that group and I had a really great discussion with Doris and Miki. So our discussion sort of centered around like the last statement in point 3 here. It might be the case that introverts are less able to participate, but we didn't necessarily think that that meant that they would be less able to benefit from group exams. If, however, that was the case, some of the solutions that we thought to sort of minimize that as a problem would be to be prescribing roles for students as they enter the group discussion portion. So perhaps if somebody's more introverted, they can take on like the role as a note taker or a scribe for the group so that they can still participate, but sort of silently. The other thing that we said here was to potentially give students a bit more time so that if they're introverted, they just have a little bit more time to be thinking about their comments before they share it with the group. And then here I'll end by saying that we had a question amongst us, which is how are these groups typically curated? Because on the one hand, it might be helpful for all the introverts to be together, to sort of band together in terms of their introvertedness. But on the other hand, we saw that it might be helpful to group extroverts and introverts together so that they can sort of like help each other out.
Yeah. It's an art, isn't it? So just very quickly explain the one reason why introverts may be less able to benefit is that one way to benefit is to participate. Because by participating, they will be actively processing and also explaining the information. And to the extent that, I think that's question 2, to the extent that the best way to learn is by teaching, then the claim is that introverts may not be able to benefit as much because they will be listening. But one thing that you said is in terms of time, giving them more time to prepare. In fact, that already exists in group exams because they have already done the exam once. So introverts will have, hopefully, plenty of time to think through the ideas before they are put into a group where they need to speak and exchange ideas with other people.
Yeah, thanks for cueing that. That reminds me that was something that Doris and Miki had said also. So shout out to my group members there.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a lot. And I think that it is a legitimate concern that we need to think very carefully about in what ways and to what extent group exams can minimize such problems. Oh, it's 12 o'clock. So our time is up, unfortunately. So the documents, the collaborative documents will be there for a year. So feel free to save the link and then go there to make reference to it anytime you would like to. Thank you for your participation and all the discussion. It's from my perspective, I think this is a very good discussion. It does not happen very often that you will see so many ideas being thrown around. I think it's partly because here we are particularly talking about how to encourage the exchange of ideas, and that's why people are very eager to exchange ideas, because we all like this idea. So I will pass it back to Elisa. I think I saw that there is a survey. Is that right, Elisa?
A link to the feedback survey. We would appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out the brief survey. You can click the link and then take your time to fill it out after the session. We will also send you an email later this week to tell you about the resources that we'll put up on the UBC wiki page for you to browse the resources for the whole Spring Institute. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.